This guide provides step-by-step instructions to build an InfoPath-based process using the K2 Designer for SharePoint. We'll be acting in the role of an HR manager who is responsible for leave request administration, ensuring that employees don't request more vacation than they've accrued, that leave requests are reviewed and approved quickly, and that vacation schedules are communicated appropriately. The current manual process often results in delayed approvals and inaccurate vacation balance accounting. To help resolve these issues, we'll automate the process using K2. Let's walk through the steps for building the process in the K2 Designer for SharePoint. In the first step, we'll create a new process based on the Leave Request form library in the SharePoint site. The Leave Request form was built in InfoPath and has been deployed to the Leave Request library to provide a single location for tracking leave requests. We'll click on the Leave Request link located in the Libraries menu to navigate to the Leave Request form library. From the Library Tools section, click the Library tab and then click on the K2 process icon on the right-hand side of the ribbon control. The K2 Designer for SharePoint will open. The K2 Designer for SharePoint is our browser-based designer that gives us the tools we need to build a workflow based on the information we have in the Leave Request InfoPath form. On the Welcome screen, we'll select Create a New Process. We'll give the process a name, like Leave Request. Next, we want to set up a unique identifier that will be given to each instance of the process. In the Folio field, we'll type Leave Request. We want to include the name of the employee requesting leave, and we want to use the information that was included in the InfoPath form that kicks off the process. To access this information, we'll use the context browser, which provides us with a list of all the information we can use in this process. We'll configure our process with the appropriate variables we want to include, and then at runtime, the K2 server will populate those fields with the correct values. The context browser includes things like the fields that are in the InfoPath form we're using, information specific to our workflow process like who started it, as well as any fields we've created specifically for use in the workflow. The name information is available in the InfoPath form, so we'll expand the InfoPath Employee Info node and drag the employee name over to the Folio field. We'll click Next a few times to get to the Start Form section of the wizard. This screen allows us to choose which view of the InfoPath form will be used to start the process. Select the New Leave Request view and click Next. Those are the only options we need to choose at this point, so we'll click on Finish. As the first step in the workflow, we want to notify the person who submitted the leave request that the approval process was started correctly, so we'll send them an email. To do that, we'll use the Send Email Action wizard, which we'll drag onto the canvas from the ribbon toolbar. The wizard configuration opens and we'll set the following details. We'll set the From field to use hr@k2eval.com. We want to send this to the person who started the workflow, so we're going to use our originator variable. We'll again make use of the context browser for the appropriate information. We want the originator's email address, so we'll expand the process context node and drag over the originator email. For the subject, we want to customize it with the type of leave being requested, so we'll type Leave Request Received, and then use the context browser to get the leave type field from the Leave Request InfoPath form. Next, we'll build out the body of the email to be sent. We have an email template we'd like to use to format the message, so we'll set that by clicking on the Load HTML Template button. Our template is stored in a SharePoint library called Template Library, so we'll select that and then select the Leave Request Received template file. Now that we have the template loaded, we can go and update the message with the appropriate information. There are placeholders for each piece of information we want to customize with specific information about the leave request. First, we want to replace the leave type with the appropriate type, so we'll drag leave type over from the InfoPath context node. Next, we want to include the start and end dates for the leave, so we'll drag both those fields over from the InfoPath context node as well. Once the email is configured, we can close the wizard. We'll rename this step by double-clicking on the label and typing confirmation email. Finally, we want to set up an outcome from this email step so that the workflow progresses on to the next task. To do this, we'll hover over the email step and click on the workflow step outcome icon. This will open the outcome wizard where we'll add an outcome called Next. In this step, we'll configure the process to check the approved leave request list, a SharePoint list that is used to keep track of all approved leave requests for the employee's current vacation balance. We'll be using this information later in the process to route the request down the appropriate path. K2 provides a feature called K2 Smart Objects that provides process designers with an easy way to access line of business data for use in their processes. This capability can also be used to give dynamic access to SharePoint lists so that information stored there can be used in business rules that are part of the process. We want to use the approved leave request list in this manner, so we'll set up a K2 Smart Object based on that list. In your browser, open a new window and browse to the home page of the SharePoint site. Click on Site Actions and select the K2 Site Settings option. From the Smart Object Management section, click the K2 Smart Object Site Lists and Libraries option. Under Lists, verify that the checkbox next to the Approved Leave Request list is checked. If it isn't, select it and click the Create button. Now we have a connection to the Approved Leave Request list that will allow us to retrieve information from the list and also update the list with new information as part of the process. Go back to the K2 Designer for SharePoint. We want to include information in our InfoPath form on the number of vacation days that have already been used, so on the ribbon, select the InfoPath category and drag the InfoPath data event onto the canvas. We want to update the Days Taken Past Year field, so select that field from the template schema. To get the value for this field, we're going to use a K2 inline function to calculate the sum of all the days taken by the requester this year. In the context browser, expand the inline function's mathematical node and find the sum function. For the input value, we want to use any entries that have been made into the approved leave request list for the user, so we'll expand the Smart Objects, SharePoint, Evaluation Site, Approved Leave Request node, and we'll locate the Number of Working Days Taken field. We only want information about the requester, so we'll configure a filter based on the employee name. Click Add and select Employee as the filter field. We want to set it to equal the value of the employee name field in the InfoPath form. We also want to make sure that we're only including information about vacations taken during the current year, so we'll set up a second filter that checks that the start date is in the current year. Again, we'll use an inline function to provide this calculation for us. Type Start of Year in the search box and drag over the Start of Year method that takes a date and time field as input. We'll use the Now function as input for the method so we can determine the current year. A third filter will be used to verify that the data is current by checking that the start date is also less than the last day of the current year. The filter will be configured similarly, but instead we'll use the End of Year inline function. Once our filters are configured, we can go on to the next screen. We'll select that we want all the items that match the filter to be returned. The InfoPath data event is now set up to update the InfoPath form with the number of vacation days the requester has already taken in the current year. Rename the InfoPath data event to Get Leave Days Taken. In this step, we want to configure the process to route the request down different paths depending on if the request violates the maximum vacation allowance or not. We'll create an outcome that routes those requests that do not violate the maximum vacation allowance to the requester's manager for approval. For those requests that do violate the policy, we'll route them to a rework step where the requester will have an opportunity to change the request. To create a new outcome, we'll hover over the Get Leave Days Taken step and click on the Workflow step outcome icon. This will open the Outcome Wizard where we'll add two outcomes, one called Rework and one called Approval. Select the checkbox next to the Rework outcome and then click the Edit button to edit the outcome rules. We want to create a rule that will add the number of vacation days being requested to the number of days the requester has already taken this year. To do that, we'll use an inline function expression. In the Object Browser, expand the inline function node and drag the expression function over to the left part of the rule statement. In the expression configuration window, give the expression a name of Calc Total Days. Click on the arrow next to the expression name to show additional properties. Select the checkbox to save the expression configuration so we can use it again later in the process. From the Context Browser, expand the InfoPath context node and drag over the Days Taken Past Year field. Click on the plus button. Next, drag over the Number Working Days Taken field from the InfoPath form. Click OK to close the expression window. Next, select the greater than operator. In the right-hand value field, type in 15. 15 is the maximum number of leave days available, so if the value of the expression is greater than 15, we'll route the request to the originator for rework. Click OK to close the rule for the rework outcome. Now, deselect the checkbox next to Rework and check the box next to Approval. Click the Edit button in the toolbar. For this rule, we want to check to make sure the total number of vacation days is less than 15. On the left side of the rule, we'll use the Calc Total Days expression we saved previously. Expand the inline function Saved node in the Context Browser and drag the Calc Total Days function over. Select the less than or equal to operator. Type 15 as the value on the right side of the statement. Click OK to close the rule for the approval outcome. In this step, we'll configure the rework step. This step will allow the person who requested leave to add additional information or correct any errors that may have been found during a previous step. First, we want to add a comment to the InfoPath form so that the requester will know why the form is coming back to them. From the ribbon, drag the InfoPath data event onto the placeholder in the Rework branch of the process. In the template schema, expand Approval Info and select the Manager Notes field. Type the Auto Rework message to let the requester know that the request has exceeded the maximum number of vacation days allowed. Rename the InfoPath data event to Update Form. Add a new outcome to this step called Next. From the ribbon, drag the User Task Wizard onto the placeholder for the next step. On the first wizard screen, enter the details for the task. We'll name this step Rework. This task will have two possible actions, for resubmitting the request and for canceling the request. On the next screen, outcomes have been generated for the resubmit and cancel actions. Instead of creating a new step and duplicating existing logic in the process, we'll configure the outcomes to route to existing steps and existing logic. For the resubmit outcome, select the approval step from the Link to dropdown. The cancel request outcome will go to a new step, so we'll leave that as the default. The next screen allows us to configure the view of the form we want to show for this task. Select the Review Request view and set the Task Action field to be the Review Status field in the InfoPath context node under Employee Info. The next screen allows us to select the person, people, or group we want to assign the task to. We want to send this task to the original requester, so we'll select the originator as the destination user. Next, we want to configure an email to be sent to the user if the request is canceled. We'll drag the Send Email action over to the Canceled branch and we'll set the following details. Set the From field to be hr@k2eval.com. Drag the originator email over from the context browser. For the subject, we want to customize it with the type of leave being requested, so we'll type Leave Request Canceled and then use the context browser to get the leave type field from the Leave Request info path form. For the email message body, we can use our previous method to customize the content by using a pre-configured email template and then updating the placeholder information with the appropriate variables from the context browser. Once the email is configured, we can close the wizard and rename the step to Cancel Notification. In this step, we'll be configuring a task that will send the leave request to the manager for approval. From the ribbon toolbar, we'll select the user task and drag it onto the placeholder to the right of the Get Leave Days Taken step. We'll set the name of the task to Manager Approval. We'll set the actions available for this task to Approved, Declined, or Query, which will send the leave request back to the originator for rework. On the next screen, outcomes have been generated for the 3 actions. Since we already have a rework step configured, we'll set the query action to route to the rework step. For the other 2 outcomes, we'll leave the default to create a new step. The next screen allows us to select the info path view we want to display to the manager. We'll select the Manager Approval view. We also need to select the field that will display the available actions to the manager. We'll use the Manager Approval field found in the InfoPath context Approval Info node. In a typical scenario, you would want to configure this task so that it routes to the requester's manager, but in this case, to make our sample easier to use, we'll assign the task to the originator. When the leave request is approved, we want to notify the requester, so we'll set the process to send an email. Drag the Send Email action from the ribbon toolbar to the Approved placeholder. The wizard configuration opens and we'll set the following details. We'll set the From field to use hr@k2eval.com. We'll drag the originator email over from the context node. We'll include the leave type and approved information in the subject. For the email message body, we can use our previous method to customize the content by using a pre-configured email template and updating the placeholder with the appropriate variables from the context browser. Once the email is configured, we can close the wizard. We'll rename this step by double-clicking on the label and typing Approved Mail. As with the approved request, we also want to send a notification to the requester if their leave request has been declined, so we'll configure the process to send an email when the request is declined. Drag the Send Email action from the ribbon toolbar to the Declined placeholder. The wizard configuration opens and we'll set the following details. We'll set the From field to use hr@k2eval.com. We'll drag the originator email over from the context node. We'll include the leave type and declined information in the subject. For the email message body, we can use our previous method to customize the content by using a pre-configured email template and updating the placeholder with the appropriate variables from the context browser. Once the email is configured, we can close the wizard. Rename this step to Declined Mail. After an email has been sent letting the requester know that his request for leave has been approved, we want the process to do some additional steps, including logging the request in the approved leave request list and creating a vacation calendar item. Hover the mouse cursor over the approved mail step to access the workflow step outcome option. Create a new outcome called Next. On the ribbon toolbar, switch to the List category and drag the Create List item to the Next placeholder. We'll select the approved leave request list as the location to create the new item. We want to create the new list item using information from the leave request, so we'll use the context browser to access the appropriate fields. We want to set the employee name, the start and end dates, the number of working days taken, and the leave type. For the approval report, we'll type the report URL specific to your environment and we'll then grab the ID variable from the process context node. This will ensure that the correct report for this leave request instance is displayed. Rename the step to Log Leave Request. Create a new outcome on this step called Next. Now we want to create a new entry in the vacation calendar, so we'll again use the Create List Item action. Select the calendar list. For the title field, we'll use a combination of the employee name and the leave type, so drag over the employee name field, type a dash, and then drag over the leave type. Enter out of office for the location. Set the start and end dates using the information from the form. Drag over the Notes field from the form for the description of the item. Rename the step to Update Calendar. Now that the process has been configured, we're ready to deploy the process to the K2 server. First, we need to set up the process so that you have full administrative rights to see all the process details. Click on the File tab located above the ribbon and select Configure Process Settings, Process Rights. In the search box, type your username and click on the magnifying glass to search. Once found, drag your username over and select the Admin checkbox. Once the process rights have been set, we're ready to deploy the process. Click on the File tab and select Deploy. This will automatically save the process and will load the deployment wizard that will guide you through the steps to deploy the process. Click Next to begin the check and build step. This step verifies that all actions in the process are configured correctly. Click Next to deploy the process. This step may take several minutes. Once complete, a message will be displayed and the Finish button will be activated. Click Finish to complete the wizard.